Cool. I see people coming on. Awesome. While you're all getting set up, we'll wait a couple seconds or even a minute here to get everyone online. Thank you all for coming on a Wednesday afternoon. I hope the weather's as nice where you all are as it is where I am. It's really sunny and lovely outside, so might go for a walk later. While you're all getting established and settled in, something that I do want to mention to everyone is that I would love if you want to interact with me in terms of chatting, like we've got the chat box and things, because I think that this is going to be better if it's interactive. I didn't want to lecture at you all. I do a lot of that in my entrepreneurship class and my classes and things, and I've been creating a lot of videos and slides, and I'd really rather just hopefully answer some questions that you might have, or if we have some discussion topics that you think would be worth really chatting about, I would love to do that. So if you do have any thoughts, I think that, and I'll talk a little more about this in a second, but I think that it's something that we don't talk about enough. And so I want to give you the opportunity to, and if you prefer that I don't use names and stuff too, I'm happy to do all of that. But I honestly would just love to chat with you all about money. It sounds like a silly thing to talk about, I know, but we live in such interesting times. Obviously right now we have so much going on with the coronavirus and just that. But everything else that's going on, I know it's a huge transition time for so many of us with school and with jobs. And, these conversations should be happening more frequently. And so I wanted to really open the opportunity for us to be honest about a couple things and to talk about how we can really use money talk in a positive way as opposed to just the negative, scary thing. I've got some things we can talk about in terms of taxes and all of those important like budgeting and finances, and I've got some little stories I can tell you today as well. But the biggest thing is I don't want this to be frightening. I actually really love talking about money, and I don't really care anymore that people know that. I think that it is something that is really important to talk about. And for me, the talking about money and the financial side of what we do is super important because it allows us to continue to offer things in new and exciting ways. One of my favorite things that I remind myself of is that the more I have in my own life, the more I have to give to other people. And if I don't have anything, or if I'm starting from a place of lack, then how can I really serve the people around me? And so for me, for all of us, money is kind of a starting point. That's just how our world works. And I think denying that means that we do get stuck in that place of lack. And Kevin said, and tax day has moved to July 15. Yes, exactly. So if we do have some tax stuff, we can talk about that because it will apply in July. We had planned for this to be on tax day because frightening you all is fun, but I guess we have a few more months now. I don't know about you all, but I usually wake up on this day every year and I'm like, breathe. Because it's scary, and hopefully I have my taxes handed in by April 15th, but that doesn't always happen in time. But anyway, so until you all have some questions, I'm going to talk for a little bit. I've done, for the last few years, obviously I've studied a lot in terms of entrepreneurship in the music industry, but I've done that through researching and learning from other people who are not in the music industry. I have a lot of mentors that I look up to. They don't really know who I am, but I look up to them. They're my secret mentors who have really taught me a lot about the value of valuing myself and the work that I do in terms of not only the work itself and not only feeling good about it, but also how to value my experience and my work to make sure that I can continue to grow and offer more and more through having that level of success and financial stability for myself. I think that's so important. But a lot of the mentors that I listen to and that I have worked with, one of the things that they always come back to is this idea of having money mindset and having a really great understanding of what our mind is telling us about how we view money. I also talk a lot about the starving artist mentality. We all get sucked into this all the time, and I think that it's really important that we dig into what that is and understand that we don't have to be starving artists. It's actually a choice for a lot of us. I'm not saying that there aren't situations where things happen and it's unfortunate and things kind of snowball, but for the majority of us, there's no reason that we actually have to live in lack if we know how to then position ourselves and change the way that we think about things to set ourselves up for that more abundant lifestyle. I don't believe that it has to be either or. either or. Either or. uh, sorry, that always feels weird with my accent. I have a hard time forming the shape in my mouth. But so I don't think that our careers have to be either or. I think that they can be sustainable and fulfilling and really positive for us as artists, and artistically fulfilling, and having that artistic integrity whilst also being financially stable and secure for us. I really don't think it has to be either or. I think we just have to get creative and willing to talk about the fact that yes, money's a thing and it's not a bad thing, and it's okay to talk about it. So, still waiting on questions. If you do have any, like I said, just pipe up whenever. I really don't mind, and I would really prefer to have this as a conversation. If any of you know me, I love to talk. So, you're more than welcome to pipe up at any point. So, something that I just mentioned, the starving artist mentality, this has been a big thing that I've learned over the last few years and that I spent a lot of time researching. It's actually something that you might not know this. It's a construct from the 1850s that didn't really exist prior to then. This whole idea of starving artist mentality, meaning that if I'm not struggling for my art, then it's not legitimate art. That's where this starving artist mentality has really developed from. And it was actually from a novel by a French author, Henri Mouget, which was then transformed into what you might know as La Bohème. So we've had this really interesting development of this mentality surrounding a novel that was actually written by Henri Mouget, who died in poverty, which was glorifying this artistic bohemian lifestyle that artists were apparently meant to live in that time period. And so the wealthy in this story, the wealthy populations actually found that they wanted to look like they lived like that starving artist, because it meant that the work that they were doing was valued and really true to themselves, and having that artistic integrity and all of those things that we associate with art. They wanted to portray that in their homes, so they started to decorate interior, like doing their interior designs like you would a shabby run-down apartment in Paris. They started to really glorify this idea of the bohemian lifestyle, which then led to more of us thinking that's how the artist should live, and that's where that starving artist mentality does come from. So it's this thing that we've really held ourselves to for about 150 years. But, sorry, yes, those questions. But so we've been really living in this thing for 150 years or so without actually understanding what it is and where it came from and why we should be in that space. So we actually don't need to be thinking about what we do as if I'm not struggling, then I'm not real or I'm not authentic. Like I said, I think that the more that we have available to us, the more we can actually offer to the world around us through our art and through our work. So I do have a couple questions about taxes. So fun. This stuff is, we can dig into this for sure. I'll get philosophical again later. But so Evan said, can you discuss your process for tracking expenses as a freelance artist to maximize deductions when tax time comes? So this is something that is very important about how we do our finances and how we manage our taxes and things. So I'm not an accountant. So let me just firstly say the words that I use are not from an accountant. And that my advice is just from personal experience. So I do recommend that for any of these tax related things that you do seek a professional. I always hire an accountant or a CPA for the work that I do, because I think that it's really important that, I'm an expert in my field, so why wouldn't I pay an expert in their field to do the work that I'm not an expert for or in? So I do feel that it's helpful to really work with someone that you can trust and develop a relationship with over time, so they can help you really maximize the benefits of the tax laws and things. And of course, they change so frequently. I have a friend who's a CPA, and she was telling me the other day that everything changes so quickly, and they're really also still navigating these things. And the last few years have been really challenging on our accountants and our CPAs. So I do think that we can help minimize their work by also trusting them to be experts too. But in terms of tracking, so I'm pretty old school with this. I use just an Excel spreadsheet. I know a lot of people use QuickBooks, and QuickBooks is a fantastic resource that I do think that most people should be using. I'm just a little bit more traditional or old school, tech not savvy about how I do my accounting and things. But I just have a spreadsheet that I use that I track my work-related expenses, things like sheet music or instruments or instrument repairs, my travel expenses, mileage, my home office expenses, my internet and phone expenses, anything you can think of that I spend money on, I'll track it in that Excel spreadsheet, and I've got tabs for each month, and I've got formulas that add it all up throughout the year based on what I'm allowed to claim according to that year's tax law. For instance, every year the mileage deduction amount changes. So I think this year it's 58 cents per mile, but it's been as low as 52 cents, I think, in recent years. And it does change every year. So that's something you need to learn about and to adapt to. But I find it very useful in an Excel spreadsheet because I can itemize it really clearly. I like to be able to see exactly where I've spent my money. I like to know what it's for. And I also like to know what percentages I can claim of that. So for instance, food, if I'm traveling, like if we go to a NASA conference, because that is a business expense related to my work as a saxophone teacher in a private studio business, I can claim 50% of the food that I spend, or 50% of the money that I spend on food to be a deduction with my taxes. Now that doesn't necessarily mean that it lowers my taxes by that specific amount. It just means that it reduces my taxable income for that year by the amount that I'm claiming. So these are very specific, related to whether or not you own your own business. I do think a lot of things have changed recently. I know that there are new challenges since I think the 2019-2020 tax years that limit the amount of things we can deduct as W-2 employees. So for a lot of professors and band directors and anyone who's hired on a W-2, there are limits as to what you can deduct, which is different to what you can deduct as a business and as a business person, as a self-employed person. Fun fact, if you've ever earned any money off of the work you've done, not through a W-2, you are a business owner. So even if you're self-employed, you are considered a business owner for tax purposes. So you should always be thinking about that in terms of your finances and your taxes, thinking about the fact that you own a business. You don't have to register that business for it to be considered an actual business or legitimate in the eyes of the IRS or the government. As soon as you start earning money off of the work that you're doing, you become that business. So you do have that business entity that you can claim deductions against. Something that I know that we all want to know about is what exactly can I deduct on my taxes? And that's a really big question. It's not as simple as you would think. I was chatting with my class about this recently, actually. There are a number of people out there who will tell you every single item that you can deduct, that you can or can't deduct. And sometimes that's correct, sometimes that is not. And I've seen people being given advice to deduct their performance outfits from their taxes, 100%. Just claim it, it's performance outfit, you can deduct it, it'll be fine. But in actuality, the only reason that you can deduct something like that is if you cannot wear it elsewhere. So for example, if you are someone who owns a tux to perform in, if the IRS deems that it is likely that you could wear that anywhere else, say to a wedding, to another event, to something else, as opposed to just that performance, then they won't allow you to deduct that. It has to be exclusive for that business purpose and for that business use. So you have to be really careful with things like that. I don't deduct clothing from my taxes because I don't want to raise any red flags unnecessarily. Not because I'm doing anything bad with my taxes, but I just don't want to have to deal with that nightmare of trying to explain to them why my red glittery dress is a tax deduction when I could perhaps wear it to the world's fanciest wedding, which I've never been to, but could happen. So I find that it is better to err on the side of caution with these things rather than taking chances. But this is, again, where having that accountant or that CPA who knows you and knows your work can really be helpful. They can help determine exactly what that is. So on that thought of hiring professionals for your taxes, I know there are CPAs out there who are specialized or more familiar with freelance and nonprofit financials. Yeah, absolutely. So it just takes a little bit of work. You do have to do a little bit of work with this stuff to find the people that are going to be relevant to what you do. But it is worth doing because if they are familiar with, let's say that you're a nonprofit organization and you're needing some help with your taxes, They're going to know the ins and outs of what the IRS will and will not allow. And they're going to be really up to date with all of the things that do change and change regularly with our current tax law situation. So we know that the rules that are in place now aren't going to be the same in 2025 when things start to revert back to how they were. And so I do think that finding someone who's a specialist in your specific area is worthwhile. I also would recommend that you find someone who lives in your state at minimum, or if you can't find someone in your state, at least find someone who has worked in your state at some point, or who has connections with people in your state, because every state is, of course, different with our state taxes, local taxes, and federal taxes. This was a whole thing that I had to learn when I moved to the States that I had never understood or didn't even know about. In Australia, we don't have differences between the states on these kinds of things, or at least we didn't when I lived there. I don't know if it's changed. I haven't been keeping up with Australian tax law, but this is something that has been new that I've had to really learn to understand, is that we have differences from state to state, and there are differences from where your business is registered, if you're living and working in a different state. If you live in Texas, for instance, like I do, and I work in, I don't know, let's say I go to New York and do some work, or California, the different tax rates and tax brackets and things do impact the amount of tax you have to pay, what you can deduct, all of those things too. So I think that finding specialists is really important because they know that we do things differently, and that as musicians, our work is very fluid, particularly if you've got a portfolio career of some kind or a freelance career that does have you traveling a lot. I think that, yeah, Jacob, that's 100%. Absolutely find someone that is specialized or more familiar. I said it before, we're experts in the work that we do, but we're not tax experts. So I expect people to pay me for my expertise rather than trying to figure out how to do the work that I do themselves. Like, I know that I can expedite that process for them. I can teach someone how to play saxophone faster than they can teach themselves. So why wouldn't I then return that favor to someone who is a specialist in the area that I'm struggling with or that I need help with to speed up my process or to help me make sure that I'm getting the best out of it? Does that make sense? I know I can't see any of you. I'm going to assume that makes sense. I'm just going to nod to myself. Okay, yeah, I've got a thumbs up. I love that. I didn't know you could do that. I told you I'm not super great at technology, so this has been a fun learning. Okay, thanks, Alvin. Cool. Does anyone have any like tax-related questions while we're on this topic? I know it's a big one, so I do know that people are really worried about all of this stuff, and I know that as freelancers, and particularly anyone who teaches in the private lesson sector, I think that we all get really worried about taxes at tax time, and the number of times I've lost sleep over these things, it's awful. But honestly, at the end of the day, if you aren't trying to swindle the government, and if you're actually claiming legitimate expenses, and that the things that you are doing, they're not going to come after you if you're doing everything, the way that you should be and in the best possible faith as possible. If, they give you a chance to rectify things, if you get an audit, it's not the end of the world. You might end up having to pay more taxes. It might be a pain in the butt because you have to go back through everything, but provided that you have proof of everything that you're claiming and you have a legitimate reason for that as your business expense, then beyond just being a pain in the butt, it's not really going to be a problem. You might have to pay some extra back taxes if you claimed a performance outfit that you shouldn't have, or something like that, that they deem is not something you can actually claim. But it really won't be the end of the world. If you are deliberately trying to swindle the government, then you're in trouble. But that's kind of true anyway. It's not just a tax-related thing. So I don't think it needs to be as scary, provided that you do keep track of everything and that you work with someone who is an expert who can really help you out and help you decipher the problems. So I've got biggest mistakes you hear people making with their taxes. Honestly, it's just people, one, ignoring them. Don't do that. Don't set yourself up to have to do like 7 years of taxes in one go in the future. That sucks. So do them. One of the other things that's important as a self-employed person or a freelance artist or someone who is claiming income that's not from a W-2 is to make sure that you file taxes quarterly. again, this becomes very easy when you have someone who you're working with annually. The first year you do quarterly taxes is the hardest because you have to predict how much money you're earning for the year and then divide and how much tax you're meant to pay for that year, divide it into quarters to pay that quarterly, and then you've got to try to end up within $1,000 of accuracy by the end of the year. That's tricky the first year, but they also give you a little bit of leeway in that first year, knowing that it's not going to be totally set. But then the years after that, you just base it off of your previous year, and if you happen to have a bump in income at any time, you can always add to those quarterly tax payments. So actually, that reminds me, quarterly taxes are due. I'm not sure if they've delayed those. I need to find that one out. Just double check that one today. I'm going to go, once we get up here, I'm double checking that. But you can pay all those things online. They are very easy to do. So quarterly tax payments. If you don't do that, you will get a fine or a penalty at the end of the year. So just make sure that you do that. I don't think it's a lot, but anything is, I don't want to be paying fines for something that I could have prevented. So quarterly tax payments. I think I said another big problem is not reporting taxes. That's really important. And then just not being aware of the deductions that you can make. I think that usually people actually underreport the expenses that they have for the work that we do. I think that more often than not, people are stunned by how much money we can actually deduct on our taxes because of the work that we do and because of how much money we actually spend on work-related expenses. The arts and teaching and small business owners tend to spend a lot more money on their business than large corporations and all of those things because we have to keep learning and keep growing and having those resources for ourselves. So making sure that you actually do claim everything that you can and get to know what that is. Again, through the CPA, you can also look it all up on the IRS website. That website's a nightmare, but it is very, very useful and they're very clear about what you can and cannot deduct. And then again, if you have a question, you can ask someone who does have the answers. Like I said, I know I'm not trying to avoid giving you definitive answers. I'm not a professional tax accountant, so I'm only speaking from personal experience here. And I don't want to lead anyone astray. And I want to make sure that you all have the best possible knowledge. So I do think that the best way that you can 100% determine what you can and cannot deduct will be to talk to an accountant. The other good thing about that is that as a small business owner, you can deduct their fees from your next year's taxes because it's a work-related expense. So think of it that way. Okay, so other questions that we have here. Is graduate assistantship income taxable? How did TA go about doing their taxes with this kind of income? That is something that I don't 100% know myself. Personally, I've never been a TA or a GA, so I'm not really sure how that works from the university perspective. But I think it also is dependent upon how each university processes that. I know that different TAs and GAs get paid in different ways. So sometimes that becomes a credit for courses or course load. Sometimes that's just a lump cash sum. And there are various ways that can be handed out to you. Sometimes it's paid as an employee. They're going to be filing that information from their end with the IRS as an expense for the university. So there will be proof that you have been paid that money at some point in some way. So I think that would be a fantastic question to speak with people. If you're in the situation where you've been offered a TA or a GA or you're considering that, I think that's a really wise question to ask the people that are paying you or that are hiring you or that are giving you that scholarship money to find out exactly what that impact is going to be on your taxes. Because if you have to be taxed on that at your income rate of, it's obviously different per person, but if you imagine minimum 20% probably of taxes, I usually assume 30% because I'd rather have more money in my bank account than be in debt at the end of the year. But if you assume that you have to pay at least 20% into taxes, then you're going to be in trouble if you spend all of that and then you still have to owe that money at the end. So I think that that's a really, really great question to ask the university specifically, the HR department or whoever it happens to be on payroll, to say, how is this processed? What's my tax liability or my tax responsibility with this? And how do I make sure that I'm not going to get in trouble and do it all the right way? So I hope that helps with that question. I really just would advise you to talk with them about the specifics of that because it's a wise question to ask and it's always better to have the answer up front than to be surprised later on. Okay, I love this. See, questions are so much more fun. This is great. Okay, can you discuss how you organize and make sense of work that takes tax at source, maybe working for a university or organization, versus untaxed at the source, student paying by cash or check for a lesson? Okay, so this is where a thing like a W-2 versus a 1099 or versus nothing is really helpful. So if you are being paid by an employer of some kind and you earn over $600 from them at some point throughout the year, you will receive a document from them that says that you've earned X amount of money. This is the taxes that have or have not been paid out of that or taken out of that. You can track all of that if you're working for a university or an employer like a high school or a middle school, and you get a regular pay stub. You'll see all that information on that pay stub, so you can actually keep track of that throughout the year. But at the end of the year, they send you the overall slip with all of that information that they have filed from their end with the IRS and that you need to file from your end. If you have earned over $600 with any other business or any other person, for instance, with my saxophone academy, anyone who earns over $600 through my business from me, I create a 1099 for them and send that to them at the end of the tax year because I report their income as an expense on my business, because it is an expense on my business and it helps me reduce my taxable income. And so they need to then make sure that they report that to the IRS from their end. So if you have earned over that $600 threshold with someone and they give you a 1099, you are responsible for filing that and for counting that. Of course, under the table payments, that's why they're called under the table, right? I mean, I don't do anything. I'm like a stickler for this stuff. I do not take under the table payments, and I do not allow I don't really give them either, because I think that it's, as a business owner, it's in my best interest to make sure I'm doing everything by the book. It's also in my employees' interests that I'm doing everything by the book so that nobody gets in trouble. I'm also an immigrant, so I'm always also additionally very careful about the fact that I'm not a citizen, and so whatever I do, I always feel like there is that extra element of fear or risk associated with it. So for me, I'm just extra careful with these things. Now, I know that that's not the case for everyone. And so you have to make that decision for yourself of, are you going to take under the table payments for things? Are you going to pay people for the work under the table? And are you willing to take on the risk of getting in trouble if you get caught out on that? Or do you file it as a business expense for your small business and then claim that as a tax deduction? Again, the $600 threshold is interesting in that you must report anything over $600, but you don't have to report anything under $600, or you can report it without having to provide that 1099. So you can still reduce your income through the payments that you've been making, again, provided they're legitimate. So I always make sure that I get an invoice and send receipts and things for the people that I do pay or that I hire, even if it is under that $600 threshold, so that I can utilize that for my own expenses. That doesn't force their hand with reporting it as income, but I've done my due diligence and I've made sure that from my end, everything's fine. Cool. What apps, programs, or websites do you recommend using for tracking income and expenses, etc.? It's going to be different for everyone. Like I said before, QuickBooks is kind of industry standard with these things. It's fairly cheap to use, and it's very, very intuitive, and there are so many different features that it will cover everything that you need it to do. I use mymusicstuff.com for my teaching. So for my studio business, I like to use them because it's a little bit more it's music related. It makes me feel like I can keep track of everything I need to in a way that also sends out those automated invoices and things for me. But I know that QuickBooks does the same thing. So there are a lot of great resources out there, but QuickBooks is really that industry standard that if you don't know what to start on, start there. Cool. Yeah, so there's a couple good answers to those assistantship questions. So like I said, it's going to be different for every university. So just check it and find out. Cool. I hope that helps with the tax stuff at least. We're really lucky we have until July 15th to file them. I was so relieved to hear that because I definitely Took a little longer with my tax stuff this year, so I'm looking forward to sitting down and really digging through it. I know with everyone being so, having to adapt so much to what's happening in the world with, the work that we do, learning online, teaching online, if you bought a microphone to teach or to study or to use in your business in some way during all of this, you can deduct that from your taxes. Why not? It's a work-related expense, right? So you'll find that once things settle down, that you'll have some time to sit down and really just keep track of everything. One other thing I'm thinking of before I move on, I also do keep little envelopes in my desk, one for each month, and I'll put all of the receipts that I get each month into that envelope so that I have somewhere that I can track everything physically for the end of the year. And I label them month by month, and then at the end of the year, I pull it all out, double check it through my records, and then I'll actually combine them into one envelope that says that year on it, so that if in the future at some point I get audited, I have all of those receipts in a specific place. If you live in a warm environment, make copies of them, because the ink will fade or everything will go black or something bad will happen and you won't have proof of that, and then they'll have to take it off and then you'll owe the tax for that. And just make copies, make it digital if you want to, back up everything. You have to keep things for about 7 years. So always have copies of everything. Don't just rely on the originals. Cool. So can I talk more about my Abundant Musician project? Yes, I can. Is that it? No, I'm kidding. So the Abundant Musician project is something that I started about, 5 years ago now. It was 2015. And it was something that I started to really, I started to develop as a way to explore my interest in business as a musician. And I've been researching and learning for years about entrepreneurship as it relates to the arts, whether that's for-profit or non-profit situations. I'm definitely more in the books of, I'm more interested in the for-profit side of things. I love nonprofits and I work with a number of them and they're fantastic. But for me personally, it makes more sense for most of my businesses to be run as for-profit organizations as opposed to nonprofits, because I do want to have autonomy over these things. And nonprofits have boards and systems in place that, again, for my entities don't quite work as well. So I've always been a little more fascinated in this for-profit side of things, which is very interesting because when you talk about being a for-profit musician, people go, what? It doesn't mean that I am all about being greedy and, really pulling things out of people, but it just means more that an important part of my business is to make profit so that I can fund the work that I do. And like I said before, the basis of all of my work is that the more I have to give to other people. I just digressed a lot, but so the Abundant Musician Project actually came from my research in this area of learning more about business and for-profit business in the arts and in music and in my own work. And so it came from me experimenting with my own business as a private lesson teacher, trying out a few things. If you ever have a chance to just experiment on your own business, it's a lot of fun. I really enjoy digging into how I can improve the work that I do from the business side of things, from the administrative side of things. And there's a whole other world out there that I just had never learned anything of. So the Abundant Musician Project came from that, and it's been my way of sharing my discoveries and my experiments with people in the same way that I would if I was doing a saxophone blog or a saxophone outreach program or teaching. It's kind of come from that. So for me, it's all about my fascination with business for the musician. I was actually saying this to someone earlier today, it ebbs and flows. So there are definitely moments where I am more active on that side of things, on my blog and my article writing and my presentations and talking and things, than other times when I'm not as active. And that's also pretty normal for us as teachers and as freelancers too. So it definitely shifts and it changes. And I've noticed over time, it's moved into being this conglomerate of not just this is business, this is music, this is saxophone, but it's become more of this lifestyle thing for me that I live and breathe the things that I talk about every day, and I have quotes around my house with all of the articles or things that have inspired those articles. And I'll sit in front of the TV and watch Ugly Delicious. If anyone's seen that, super great, watch it. But I'll sit and watch Ugly Delicious with my husband, and like I'll pause the TV and be like, did you just hear that? And then we'll have, you know, a 30-minute discussion on a specific phrase that a chef said that I'm like, how do we do that in music? How do we apply that skill set or that piece of knowledge into the work that we do here in music? And it's been this really fascinating expansion of my world and my knowledge, and I'm dying to share it all with everyone. So that's where that came from, Evan. It's a little bit of a passion project. It's a work project. I do coaching through it. I work with a lot of young artists here in the States, but also I've worked with people in my home in Australia, just helping them think about being business owners and mindset development and understanding the specific ins and outs of things like money and formations of business entities and how people can just get started. I love the starting process. I love helping people take their little idea that they have and watching it blossom into something really exciting and huge. I love that part, and that's where that Abundant Musician project has allowed me to really sit for a while. I hope that answers that question for you, Evan. I do want to do some more writing. It's interesting. I thought that I would have more time to do some more writing on my blogs and things during coronavirus, but I'm sure, like all of you, a lot of my energy has turned towards building resiliency plans for myself, financially and emotionally. And so something that I thought was really interesting about this money talk that's come up today on tax day is that we're all at this point where we are trying to figure out what our resiliency plans are going to be. Like I was chatting with Ellie before, summer camps are closing, and that's a lot of income for a lot of people. And everyone's gigs over the summer have shut down. Festivals have cancelled. I think a lot of us feel this financially and are going to feel this for the next few months. So really understanding that it's okay to look at finances and money and go, okay, I need to figure out how I can continue to make the money and where that can draw from, and how can I offer the things that I offer in a way that's interesting enough and valuable enough to other people that can help me in a way that I can then give back to them. I have this favorite quote, actually wrote it down a second ago. So it's by Napoleon Hill. I have some books here. I actually was like, if we need to, I have a book club. But if anyone has ever heard of this book, Think and Grow Rich, by Napoleon Hill, it's a fantastic book. It sounds a little woo-woo, I guess, but it's from the 30s, I believe. It's really old, but it's a very standard book for a lot of self-help and professional development and entrepreneurial thinkers. But Napoleon Hill in this book says something that has stuck out to me for years, which is that if you give every man more in use value than you take from him in cash value, then you are adding to the life of the world by every business transaction. So I said this earlier, for me, the more I have to give. If I give to every person more in use value than I take from them in cash value, I'm serving myself in that I will be able to pay my bills that month. But then I'm also able to provide something more valuable to the person at the other end, which I think is a really great exchange. I mean, it's just that we're exchanging services for money. It's trading, another word. And I think that if we do it with the genuine desire to really serve the person that we are working with or that we're offering, then I don't think there's any limit as to what we can do and how we can support ourselves. So let me check. Can I elaborate on my thoughts on the business side of private studio teaching? What can we do as self-employed musicians to help start or maintain or bolster our businesses? I'm sure, Greg, that this has, this has been on the minds of so many of us. I would say raise hands, but I don't know how you all did that before. But absolutely. I mean, one of the interesting things, and someone asked me this the other day, like they said I'm a private lesson teacher and all my students are canceling their lessons at the moment. And I live in a specific place. Obviously I can't move. I don't know what to do. I want to try to, build up my studio. And I was like, have you tried looking online? And they looked at me and was like, what? I said, well, everyone, your entire audience is online right now. So what ways are you actually reaching out to them online and meeting them where they are so that you can actually build up that teaching opportunity? And they were like, oh, I didn't think of that. And I don't think they meant it as in like they hadn't been teaching online already. I just think that they hadn't thought to look where the people are. And something that is so important, and I talk about this all the time in my class with my students at Baylor, we talk about audience identification. And this is something that's huge for us, whether you're a private lesson teacher or starting a new organization or a chamber music series or anything, really, is you have to meet your audience where they are. They're not going to come and find you. The old thing of build it and they will come doesn't exist. Not in what we do and not in the way that we think it does. And so, yeah, there'll be an element of, if you are an influencer and you build something, people will come. But if you're just starting out, you have to meet people where they are. And so I think that one of the big things for us as private lesson teachers at the moment, when we're in this very strange situation where we can't go to our students physically, we have to figure out how to go to them digitally. And that can look like things like emailing their band directors. That could be finding their Instagram pages that they hang out on. It's so not pages, my goodness. But, going on YouTube, looking for the things that they are seeing and that they're interested in and kind of putting yourself in front of them so that they can find you and that they can share that with their parents. And I think we have to get creative about how we find those students and how we interact with them and meet them where they are. I think that we have to get really creative about what this is going to look like for us. I think that honestly, I'm one of those people who's probably a little more doom and gloom about the situation that we are about to find ourselves in this summer and beyond, where I don't think that we're going to be back in person for a while for many things. I mean, we're seeing universities considering not even reopening until January. So what does that look like for our students and for our middle schoolers and high schoolers? I think that we have to get really creative about what we can offer and what we can present and what we can do digitally now. And we have to embrace technology. I know that we all hate teaching online. It's so hard to teach online for everyone. For the students, it's exhausting. For the teachers, it's exhausting. It's the sound quality of things, it's not great. There are so many limitations. But what can we do even within those limitations, or what can we do to eliminate those limitations that can perhaps transcend the problems that we're dealing with at the moment? There's such an opportunity right now for someone to develop a platform that guarantees great sound quality. I don't know how someone would do that, but wouldn't that be wonderful if there was a way that we could actually have real high definition ability to communicate with each other musically, not just verbally? That's such a limitation in our field at the moment and in the work that we're trying to do as artists. So what is the way that we can transcend that? How can we be of better service to our students? What can we do that's different to the 30-minute or 60-minute lesson where we sit in a room together and play? And what's the alternative there? How do we provide value? And how do we also, this is a hard question, how do we convince people that the thing that we're offering this way is just as valuable as the thing that we're offering physically in person? And like I said before, I don't think it's either or. I think that the work that we do digitally is just as valuable, as important as the work that we do in person. We just have to know what that looks like, and we have to understand what that value is. And it might not be the same traditional value that we thought it was, and that's okay. We have to evolve too. I feel like that went on for, I said I wasn't going to lecture, but I'm sorry, I think I did. But I really do think that in order to start, maintain, and bolster our businesses right now, it's about creativity and about having some fun and exploring and understanding that everyone's in this together at the moment and everyone is dealing with the same thing. So working together, having a collaborative mindset rather than a competitive mindset, and working to overcome the challenges rather than pushing against them. I think that's how we bolster and grow. May not be exactly money talk. Okay. Can you outline your journey in building a successful and profitable private studio and competitive teaching market? And talking more, sorry, I read the Vegemite comment, talking more about times of growth when you need to invest more in tech and CPA, etc. So my journey with building a private lesson studio, I moved to Austin when my husband got the job here at UT, and I had one friend in town. I knew one person, and when we were moving to Austin, I was in Australia visiting my family. We had a 2-month vacation planned, and so I had to build my studio from the other side of the world, and that was really hard. But I got really creative. And one of my favorite things that I did, and I still do, is I did this all the time. I play games with myself. I don't need a Nintendo Switch. I just play games with myself. But I used to send out emails to people with all my information, with my CV, with a cover letter, with everything in an email that made it as easy as possible for them to say yes to me. And I would say, hey, do you need a teacher? And I would just carpet bomb everything. I'd say, all right, here is where I'm living. Here is the 50-mile radius. Here is the however many minutes I was willing to travel. I'm going to send this to everybody. And I mean, I had nothing to lose, right? I didn't know anyone, so they weren't going to be like, they would have been like, who is this person? But, I sent out emails to everyone, and I played a game of, I want you to say no to me. Make them say no to me. So I would not accept silence as an answer. And I told a few of them this since then, and they have a good chuckle, but it's one of those things that relentless pursuit of the goal. We do this in our practice. We do this in the work that we do in terms of like at school or in so many different other avenues. But relentless pursuit of that goal for your business is exactly how you get to where you need to get. And so I wasn't willing to take silence as an answer. My only options were yes or no. And so I just kept playing games with them and with me of like, all right, if I don't hear from you in a week, I will send you another email. I didn't say that to them, but in my mind, I had this like list of, if I don't hear from them a week, I'd send them another email. Then it's 2 weeks, then maybe it's another 3 weeks or something. Or maybe then I send them 2 emails a day. Or, you have to figure out what's going to work for you and just relentlessly do it. The worst thing that someone can say to you is no. And that's okay. I mean, it's a no beforehand, so what's so bad about having a no afterwards? I think that, this does come back to our money thing. Like, we have to have goals for ourselves. We have to know what our budget is every month. We have to know what our bills are going to be. And so if you're like, yeah, my expenses are, I'm going to make a number, $3,000 a month. If my expenses are this, I know that I need to at least get to that for my income. And I'm not taking no for an answer. I'm going to get to that amount. I don't care how I do it. I'm going to make sure that happens and just really, really dig into that and really commit to that. That's how then you can succeed with that. It's when we don't have that relentlessness about us that things fall apart. So it is related to that. And I do think that, when I was building my studio, that was the number one thing for me, was just to not give up, just to keep pushing, be as relentless in my pursuit of my career as I have been in the practice room. So discussed how you developed and executed programs like Saxophone Academy. I just want to have fun with my teaching. For me, the things that I offer in Saxophone Academy, they develop through collaboration with people. They develop through chatting with people. They develop through curiosity with what other things are out there. I always look kind of around me to see what's happening, what's out there, and then what can I offer that's different, that isn't already being offered. Can I offer something at a higher quality level? Can I offer something at a cheaper price point? Looking at taking inspiration from other things and going, oh, like, what can I do? Or looking inward and saying, what's unique about the thing that I do, the work that I do, the way that I teach, and how can I then bring that to my audience, which for Saxophone Academy Austin, it's been middle schoolers and high schoolers. And for me, my teaching philosophy is it's fun to be good. So I want my students to have as much fun as possible, which means that I want them to be as good as possible too, because I know that they're going to enjoy their experience more when they have that higher level of ability, much like the rest of us. So, I try to always run things through that vantage point of, is it fun? And are they going to get better doing it? And then I figure at the very least, something's going to sit. They're going to enjoy something, whether that's that they're having fun or getting better. Preferably it's both. So I just get creative and have a fun time. I'm constantly brainstorming ideas. I think last week was a crazy week. I just was sitting down each day writing, what can I do? What can I do? What can I do? What can I offer? How can I do this? And you come up with this list of 300 ideas, and 299 of them are terrible. But then there's one that you're like, oh, I could elaborate on this. And so that's when you develop it. So I think just being creative and having some fun, honestly, doesn't have to be quite so serious all the time. Finally, what exactly is Vegemite? It's delicious is what it is. It's concentrated yeast extract. And if you haven't had it before, do not eat it with a spoon. Put a little bit on some toast, put some cheese, melt some cheese on it, and then it'll be fine. That's how you do it. Don't listen to this eating a spoonful of Vegemite stuff. Okay, so from Kevin, to some degree, do you get some insight into how students are practicing when they're at home and aren't going to school every day, so you get a better idea? Oh, you do. Sorry, Kevin, that wasn't a question, that was a statement. You do get some insight into how students are practicing when they're at home and aren't going to school every day, so you get a better idea of whether or not they're practicing like they say they are. Yeah, that's true with the online thing. So maybe there's an angle there that you can, look into and address and say, okay, that's something that we can offer in this unique, different way. There's no harm in exploring and coming up with ideas. The only reason that you will fail at something is if you don't try. So there's no harm in trying. Provided you don't hurt anyone or maim anyone or injure anyone along the way, then it's fine. You can try things out. Don't do anything illegal. But you can experiment with ideas and creativity in your business and in your work in the same way that you explore and experiment with interpretation in music. There are so many parallels to what we do in the practice room to what we can do outside of the practice room. And if you allow yourself to think about problems that you face in business or in life or in finances or whatever it is, if you allow yourself to think like a musician in a practice room about these problems, you'll find some really creative solutions. And that's one of the greatest things that we have to offer the world as musicians, is our ability to problem solve creatively. So I actually think that whilst, just to again bring this back to this idea of finances and money, while we are all nervous about what's to come here, and while we're all concerned that we're all going to go bankrupt and live on the streets and be homeless, the reality is that's not going to happen, because as human beings and as creative people, we have the solutions inside of us if we allow ourselves the permission to approach the challenges in our lives the way that we approach them in the practice room. Yeah, it's a lot of words. I would love to hear some thoughts from you all if you're still interested in chatting. Something that I find, another statement that I find really interesting. There's a book that I've read called How Rich People Think. And again, sounds like a really silly title for a book, but it's really interesting because it talks about just the different attitudes that we all have towards money and towards finances, that come from our upbringings, come from the communities that we're in, the societal beliefs that we follow and that we circulate. But one of the things that I love, and here's another quote from this book. It's by a guy called Simon Siebold, I believe. But he said that the rich understand money flows from ideas. And since ideas are limitless, money's limitless. And so, again, creativity is the thing that we do. We are constantly resolving these problems that we face. We're constantly evolving as people and as musicians, and facing challenges head on with curiosity and intrigue, that if we allow those ideas and the way that we think about things in the practice room to permeate the things that we do outside of the practice room, then not only is money limitless, but everything else is limitless too. So, I think that, I think that we just have such a unique opportunity here, if we can embrace the terrifying nature of technology, to really create something exciting and beneficial for our community that doesn't have to be scary and that doesn't have to cause us all to become homeless on the street. Yes, I can repeat the name. So the app that I use for my music business tracking, it's mymusicstuff.com. I can type it in the chat. It's a really helpful one. You pay $13 a month, but it does pretty much everything. You can keep track of expenses. It doesn't line up with anything like QuickBooks, so you do have to export the data and things for taxes and things at the end of the year. But it does hook into Stripe and PayPal, and you can take payments through it. Speaking of payments of things, please do not use Venmo for business payments. I don't know if you've read the terms and conditions, but Venmo is typically not actually meant to be used for business because there are no fees or tax reporting associated with it. I don't know if they've changed things recently because, again, coronavirus is having everyone adapt their business plans and models. But Venmo is really, I would not recommend it for business purposes. And I just think it's so important, again, to realize that when you're doing something for tax purposes and doing something in your business, make sure you're doing it legitimately. PayPal fees are a pain, but you can also claim them as a deductible expense on your taxes. So, I refuse to use Venmo. I don't even have Venmo on any of my devices, and it drives people crazy. But I'm like, if I have it, then I will be forced to use it, and I do not want to use it. So do not ever try to Venmo me anything. I will take PayPal all day. But it's something worth considering too, making sure that whatever platform you use for finance, for income is important. Any other questions or thoughts from anyone today? I have a big stack of books here. I can show you some of my favorite resources for reading if you want to learn a little bit more about money mindset and how you can really develop a strong belief in yourself, but also understanding of things. Okay, I see a thumbs up. Cool. I so want to do like an Oprah's book club. I tried to do it with my class and they didn't seem to think it was as cool as I did, but whatever, it's fine. So one of the ones that I mentioned before, Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. It's such a standard. Also, this one apparently is fancy because it's got fun little pages on it, but really, really old book, but definitely something that's worth reading. The language in it is very, very much older, but it's super fun. While I'm on that topic, this one is a very well-loved book of mine. You can see the pages are very torn. The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks. This is probably one of the most influential books I've ever read. This book is really helpful for overcoming any kind of limit that you might be feeling you're stuck under, help you overcome any kind of challenges, or just get you thinking about things in a really different way. This one I would recommend that everybody reads multiple times. I think I read it once or twice a year. It's fantastic, and it's definitely well loved in this household. So Gay Hendricks, The Big Leap. For something totally fun, and this one, you were allowed to laugh at me about this one. Tony Robbins' Unshakable. Tony Robbins is definitely a self-help guru, and if anyone knows of Tony Robbins, he's also very outspoken and a huge public figure. But this book is really interesting because it does talk about finances in a way that I had no idea about. So things like investment finance, and I found myself saying things that I did not even know that I could say about understanding the difference between index funds and mutual funds, and why Warren Buffett is now one of my heroes, and what Warren Buffett would do if he was to invest money right now. It led me to really uncover a whole other world of thinking about finances, just in a way that I never had. I'd never taken any finance courses in school. I'd never really done anything like that. And it's a great read. So if you're interested, Tony Robbins, Unshakable. Then I've got some more well-known ones that I think that you will all probably know. David Cutler, his Savvy Musician book. If you haven't read this, you should, 100%. It's a great rundown of a lot of different topics, a lot of different tips on how to be really smart as a musician, as a freelancer. I got a chance to work with David at his Savvy entrepreneurship program a few years ago, and he's wonderful. He and I, we spent a long time just chatting, but it's a lot of fun. It's really interesting that a lot of the things that he talks about are things that we all know, but just never really think to put into words, or don't really think to adapt or adopt, as it were. So David's wonderful, and he's been one of our leaders in the development of the entrepreneurial field here in the arts for a while. So I recommend that one for sure. He's also got one called I think it's the Savvy Music Teacher, specifically for private studio teaching. So that's another one if you're specifically looking for something. I was kind of bummed that he wrote that because I was like, ooh, I want to write that. So I recommend it. All of the material in there is fantastic. I'm just looking across, so I'm missing one of my other books that I was going to show you. Angela Miles Beeching's Beyond Talent, also really good for professional development and for thinking about things, with a little bit more of a business mindset. Angela is, again, one of our leaders in the industry for these things. And whilst it's not specifically related to business and entrepreneurship and money and things, she covers a lot, and it's talking a lot about how you can really develop yourself as a professional artist and as a freelancer, as a musician in some kind of, in any capacity, I guess. It's creating a successful career in music. I was covering the title. Another one that I was planning on getting out, but I forgot. It's called The Entrepreneurial Muse by Jeffrey Nitsch. It's a new book. I think it came out last year. It's purple in the cover, kind of a purple maroon color. It's a really fascinating read. Jeffrey Nitsch teaches in Colorado, and his book is really, really interesting. It's a little more intense of a read, but it talks a lot about his process as a pianist, as a performer. He talks about when he hit his rock bottom and developed from there and really grew his lifestyle and his career in a way that he had no idea that he could do. And so it's this really great journey with a lot of examples, a lot of research, and just a lot of really helpful information. So it's called The Entrepreneurial Muse. His name is Jeffrey Nitsch. I've got one other book that I'm thinking of. I don't have it in hard copy because I bought it through Audible. I love listening to things through Audible. If anyone's read Real Artists Don't Starve by Jeff Goins, that's the book that I would have written if I had. If I'd written a book, that'd be the one. I was reading that book and was like, oh, you say that, we say that. It was really cool to find another person who thought about things very similarly to how I have over time. And interestingly, he also talks about Henri Mouget, and I hadn't picked, that was one of those moments where I didn't know anyone else talked about that, and so he did. So it was very cool. But Real Artists Don't Starve is a fantastic book, and his writing is really, really great, really interesting, very, it's personal, so you get engaged and you get invested in his story quite a bit, but it's just a fascinating book to read. So that's another one that I really, really recommend. Jacob, one book that covers more of the music business at large and deals with more legal topics. Donald Passman's All You Need to Know About the Music Business is good. I actually don't know that one, but now I'll put that on my list to check out. I have this other one behind me that I wasn't going to show you. I did have. If you're interested in a music entrepreneurship book, Introduction to the Music Industry, very interesting. Lots and lots of really helpful, very easy to digest content. It's by Catherine Fitterman Radville. I have sticky notes sticking out of it, but if you're interested in something more along the lines of a textbook, this one's really helpful. I have a whole bookshelf full of things, but I was trying to pull off some of the best ones. For other great reads, Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. It's just a great book. It's how to interact with people really positively. There's a great story in here about Benjamin Franklin and how he was able to network successfully with some assemblymen in the assembly. I'm not really sure how those things worked back then, but he was trying to get in the good books of someone, and he didn't really know how to reach them, and they were on the opposite side of things, and he asked if he could borrow a book from them because they had like a rare book or something, and talks about this, what's now called the Benjamin Franklin effect, is that when you ask someone to do a favor for you, they're more inclined to do more for you later on. So it's in a really positive way. That sounds kind of manipulative, but in a really positive way, like it just was a great relationship building opportunity. So this one is a great book if you're looking at a networking or relationship building book. I realize this is now turning into Jess's book club and not let's talk about money, but I don't know. I'm not upset by that. I love books. So does anyone have any more questions at all? I'm happy to kind of finish up if no one does. I know that you've all probably got 1,000 different things to do, and you've probably spent far more time online than you would have liked to normally on a Wednesday, but I really do appreciate everyone being here. If anyone does want to this is going to sound really strange, but if anyone does just want to talk about money at any point, feel free to reach out to me. My website is jessvoigtpage.com. Nice and simple, but it's Jess, Voigt, page.com. There's no H. And my email address for that website is just jess@jessvoigtpage.com. You can also reach me at jessica_voigt@baylor.edu. That's another one of my useful email addresses that I'm always checking out lately because we all live so much online right now. But if everyone is finished with questions, Ellie, I think we can probably wrap it up for today. I'm not sure what the process for that is, but I really appreciate you all being here with me, and I appreciate spending the time with you all. Hopefully this was helpful. Like I said, if you have any questions, just reach out to me. Happy to talk about it. Oh, you're also lovely.
Great. Thank
I
you
hope
so
you all
much.
enjoy the rest of the semester.
Yeah, Dr. Nab lost all power in his house, so isn't
Oh
there to
no.
thank you. But thank you to him for organizing this, and thank you to you for all of your wisdom. We really appreciate it.
Of course. Enjoy your afternoons, everyone.